plethora of ages, from the ages of 13 all the way up to elderly. So myself, though, I do have a degree, master's in clinical psychology. I also support a Cinecore from the adolescent side. So I am in the adolescent realm. So everything that I deal with will be the youth, but well versed in all the other areas also. I love to read, love anime, love to work out. Beyond that, though, I really have a passion of just serving people in general, mental health, SUD, which is substance use, and just that's just my passion. That's my passion.
Favorite anime and why?
Favorite anime and why? Old or new?
Oh, you're gonna test me right here, my friend. I love it. Um, do old because I'm pre 2005 anime.
Okay.
So I missed a lot
So
of good stuff. I know there's a lot of good stuff now. So go old, then go new for me.
yes. So old for me, right? I have to give two. Um, Dragon Ball Z. That's what kind of like locked me in. But there was an anime that I started with when I was younger, and I didn't know it. I was just watching it. But now that I'm older, I can really appreciate it. And it was Gundam Wing. Gundam Wing because of the just layout of how the different worlds were going on with the government and everything else. But definitely way ahead of its time. And and you said new, right?
Yeah, give me new because the old ones I'm gonna touch on because those are two of
Okay.
my favorites, but give me a new.
Got it. Got it. New. Hmm. Attack on Titan. I would say Attack on Titan because of the storyline. It's a you don't know who to side with unless your personal feelings come into play.
I'm a big Dragon Ball Z fan. I have every episode from Dragon Ball
Mhm.
to Dragon Ball Z. GT I didn't get into.
Same.
But I love the design, like the Super Saiyan 4 with the half man, half ape, I believe it is.
Mhm, mhm.
And now it's actually canon, so perfect. I know before it really wasn't. I haven't watched anything after that. Gundam, I liked what I saw. I didn't get into it as much as Dragon Ball Z, but I think if I remember correctly, they made two movies about it.
They made some movies about it, so you have, like, the older Gundam, right, which is just Gundam, and then you have Gundam Wing, right, which is the one I'm talking about with, like, Hero and, other characters like that, and then you have some newer ones that came out, but I'm actually talking about the Gundam Wing. That particular one is, like, the one that I watched over and over, but there are older ones too, so you gotta it's a couple of different names for them, but that Gundam Wing is the one. That's the one.
Okay, classic. I remember growing up, it was teens. And the beautiful thing I liked about Dragon Ball Z is in my immediate family, it's my father, it's myself, and my younger brother. So there's three generations. In
Right.
Dragon Ball Z, there was Goku, Gohan, and Goten.
Yes.
Right? So we used to, my family wasn't close, but when it came to Dragon Ball Z, we all sat down and made sure that we're able to watch Dragon Ball Z together. We could relate because there's three generations of us. And I had a lot of strong emotions growing up, a lot of like maybe let's say frustration and rage.
Mhm, mhm.
So every time I would see Gohan get mad and power up, that was me.
Yeah.
Essentially, right? You have this unlimited potential. You have this person who's destined to be the strongest of that family, right? So it was interesting to see because my father did really well, such as like Goku, right? But then you had me who had all the potential. I got there similar to him, and then you had my brother Goten, who um who had a lot of success earlier on, but he just kind of left it. So it was interesting to see how those three characters how we're related to each and how we um aligned with each one, and then ended up our lives were similar in a way, in a sense.
Mhm.
Do you see like for yourself? When we have anime, we have these childhood shows or these cartoons or manga, whatever it is you want to call them. Do you still see kids being so involved in their superheroes that they feel super themselves in their lives?
Mm. Great question, great question. And I say that's a great question because just like anime, where it's, such a various, scope of different shows, genre, on and on and on, right? Like it's so many different things. But when you're looking at me dealing with adolescents and how they view things, it's very surprising that you don't see them as enthralled, maybe with the earlier generations, with certain heroes or people like that. And I think it's because it's one of those things as we get deeper into this conversation, I'm pretty sure we're going to cover how they've been stripped away from that childhood of being able to just enjoy those things, like how you said, like you could start to relate to characters, or you could start to look at characters and say, like, that's like me. But it's so little of that that you see in this particular field because they've been taken away from that so early. So I would have to say, if I'm being transparent and honest, that you don't really get to see them be kids much unless they're outside playing. It's just one of those things where that aspect of how we had those heroes that we'd be like, hey, I want to be like, Superman, or I want to be like Batman, or I want to be like Goku, or I want to be like, this character. And it's just like those things were just stripped away from them and they don't necessarily have that same connection.
How do you think we can get that back, not only for kids, but let's say like young adults who maybe are feeling depressed or lonely, and we can help them to feel like the superheroes of yesterday when you and I were growing up?
Mm. So that's a heavy question to unpack, but I'm gonna try my best to unpack all of it together. I think the first thing is giving them that grace of space. And I'm going to break that down a little bit. The grace of space, it's a lot of times that people who are going through different things, whether it's mental health, whether it's substance use, different type of traumas, a lot of times they feel like they are labeled by that. So whenever you're talking to them, they're labeled by this trauma or they're labeled by this experience that they've had in life. So automatically that becomes the conversation, or that becomes the thing they want to stay away from, or that becomes the thing that they're worried about to trigger, rather than us bringing them in a space where they're free to explore those things that we have experienced, right? Almost as an oasis away from the things that they're fighting and toiling with.
I like that answer because that's something that makes sense to me, especially as I look back on my life, and it was such a big part of my life. That type, like even like video games to a degree, like just the characters were so much more relatable. It appears, and I remember reading an article where they called this the superhero effect, where you had children tell you who their favorite superhero was. I'm Batman, I'm Superman, I'm Supergirl, I'm Wonder Woman, whatever the case is, and you gave them a cape and you said, today you are your favorite superhero. All of a sudden they became more confident, they did better in school, they could run a little bit faster. Hell, maybe even some of them could fly away as some of their superheroes, right? But the beautiful thing was you change someone's perception of themselves, and all of a sudden they can do better because they had the confidence to overcome the childhood trauma, the pain, the breakup, the relationship, the divorced parents, whatever was impacting them, that cape was
Mhm.
power. We talked about trauma. We talked about some of the things that we had growing up, which inspired us. When it comes to, and you mentioned earlier, substance abuse, what are some of the obstacles that you think in people's life that maybe leads them down a path that maybe isn't as healthy as it should be?
Oh, wow. So there are a couple of different paths that I'll call the most common paths. And I'll talk about those, even though there might be some that are missed, even though I talk about some of the common paths. One of the common paths is one that I believe that everybody is familiar with: peer pressure, right? Wanting to be part of a certain group, or wanting to belong, right? Wanting to belong with a group of people that you love or care for, and they're doing this. So, why not me? I want to fit in. I don't want to be the oddball out, not doing what my friends or those that I'm connected with are doing, right? So that's one path. Another path, which I see very much more common now, is that coping. right? They're using this to cope with the things that they're experiencing, whether it's trouble at the home, right? Whether, and you'll be surprised, the stress of school, right? The stress of potentially failing or not meeting a certain, criteria or standard that's been set for them. And that's another one, right? So coping, using it as a coping mechanism with the things that they're dealing with. And the third one, right, which is one that I feel is not talked about much, is the experiment, right? And I call it the experiment because, just trying it, right? Like it's not even necessarily peer pressure. It's just like, hey, I hear about this. I'm just wondering what is all the hype is about, or this and the other. And then next thing you know, that one time, and now you're in it deep, right? Because you're chasing that same feeling you might have gotten, or you're wondering if something else will make you feel different. And now that experiment, right? That one time that you're trying something new, you're now in this different world that you weren't expecting to travel down.
I remember peer pressure so much more in the later years of high school. So what's that, 17, 18?
Yes.
Um, it was at least for me, it was pretty quiet up until then. And then the last year of my high school was okay, maybe because I'm older and I understand a little bit more. But then when I got to college and university, that peer pressure ramped
No.
up. We
Yes.
have our own money. We probably have our own car. We've been with girls. We've been with guys, right? It was just like a whole new world, like Aladdin was singing that night to Jasmine, right? Um, it was tough because I've seen people lose their lives, not necessarily, let's say, on a suicide, and that does happen, but they just lost total control, and it's a shame because we're so young
Yeah. Yeah.
at that age, right? Like, how scary do you think it is for someone 19, 20, 21 to lose control of their lives, make decisions that's going to impact them potentially for the next 40 to 50 years?
Mhm. And it's ironic that you mentioned the certain age ranges because when I mentioned that, some self-disclosure, right? Whenever I started college, I was actually 16. So I was 16, turning 17 into my freshman year in college. And like you said, that world of college and a peer pressure because of the things you have access to, and there's not that extra layer of parental supervision or other adults that are there to say, hey, don't do this or don't do that. But I mentioned that as a segue to now it is much earlier in the age range of that peer pressure. How you're talking about in high school in the later years, like junior, senior, now it's middle school. Middle school is where the extra heavy pressure starts. It's even in elementary, but that peer pressure is not there in elementary. It's there in middle school. That is the world we're in now.
You just blew my mind. Middle school? That's what, 10?
Uh, maybe just a tiny bit older, like 12. So about 12,
12.
yeah, about 12 is 12 starting to maybe 13, right in that age, 12 to 13. And I would say, and this is one of the things that maybe we jump into too somewhere along the conversation, that the access that social media gives you to the information and the different things that are out there, that is what is supercharging that effect, right? Because I would assume that around certain our age range, the internet was just kind of getting going, like AOL dial up, and we're sitting in chats inside of the chat, and we're thinking like, man, we're talking to somebody, like you in Canada, right? And I'm on AOL, but now the type of social media access now, right? It's crazy. It just blows the whole knowledge bug out the door.
I've seen that where I spend some time online just for like if I'm looking up interviews just to see to get a pulse on what's being talked about. And if I look back on my childhood, because I'm almost 40 now, so it's not like it's that long ago, but 20
Mhm,
years, 25 years compared to what's going on today is almost like 100 years in
mhm,
difference,
mhm.
right? You mentioned dial up. I remember dial up, even though I was at the end of that, because I was still very young. Um, I remember doing a talk at a school. This was middle school slash high school.
Mhm.
And I was talking to some of the teachers, and she was like, they're telling me like, Train, you'd be surprised at some of the struggles that they go through. I was like, okay, just tell me some of the struggles that, those kids who are, as you mentioned, 12, who are entering their teens and end up high school. She's like, Train, they're sexually active. Many of them have tried drugs. Many of them have had some mental health crisis, depression, anxiety, whatever the case is. And I remember entering that room and I'm looking at the students that I'm speaking to. A part of me is like, there's no way these kids who look so young are
Mhm.
going through this. And then I took off my everyday hat and I put on my coach hat, which is the reason I was there. I was like, I can see it.
Mhm.
I can see it, right? Because when you have the styles that they're adopting when it comes to the way they dress, when you have the things that they're talking about, to your point, when you have social media where they're seeing their favorite people in an everyday life, and you're like, okay, when I grow up, I want to be that way, but they can't wait to grow up. They want it
Mm.
right now, right here. What do you think are some of the consequences of young adults wanting to grow up so fast because of what they see on social media?
Thank you. So I'm gonna nerd out just a little bit right here. So stick with me just a little bit. So because is this large age range of brain development, right? So we're looking at all the way from those elementary years, even into some of that early college, that our brain is still really developing who we are, what are the things we're interested in, our actual capacity to learn, and all those different things. And whenever you're this young and you're exposed to drugs, trauma, or anything that has a significant effect in your daily social life, your development and your view of the world is not going to be the same as a sober or a person that has not experienced trauma. And it's just one of those things that it can follow you and really begin to form how your life goes because of that drug or because of that trauma or because of that thing that you may have experienced that is way too early in life for you to be able to process and understand what you are experiencing. So that's where you get those behavior issues. That's where you get those learning disabilities. That's where you get those, as I was mentioning earlier, right? That's stripped away from the childhood, of the true child experience, which a lot of us, if we be honest, right, we say, hey, if I could go back to being a kid for a little bit and actually take advantage of that, I will. But that's because now we understand the type of support that was there for us versus when you become an adult and it's all on you.
I would have loved to be able to relive my childhood just because there's a lot of things that I would have, if I had a do over in my teens, I would have definitely had a do over. But my 20s is where I struggled the most. And that's where I experienced my most trauma because my parents divorced, my relationship at the time was ending, and I was having difficulties at work. So, you know how usually you have like a safe space? It's either at
Mhm,
home, at work, or in the arms of the person you love. I
mhm.
didn't have it at home. I didn't have it at work, and I did have it in the arms of the person I loved. And you're absolutely right because it strips away a part of us, and sometimes you don't get it back, but sometimes we do. What are some of the steps that maybe the person can take in general to maybe safeguard themselves from their identity, from their more innocent experiences being stripped away from them?
So the first thing, right, before I even jump into that, I want to mention this because this is very important. Trauma and certain experiences in life range and are different for each person. So what I may not feel is traumatic, right? To somebody else is traumatic. Your trauma is your trauma. So I do want to mention that before I go on, because some people will downplay or they will suppress that and say that can't be trauma. I got to be tougher than this or this and the other. No, if it played a significant role in adjusting or moving your life's path, that's trauma, right? It's trauma. You can be in driving and somebody can go 20 miles per hour and just tap the back of you. That could be traumatic for you because now you're looking in your rearview mirror every time you come to a stop, making sure that and hoping that the next person doesn't run into you. Right. So it's one of those things that I want to put that out there first, that trauma for each person shows up differently. Now, as you asked your question, right, to jump into that now, that we can acknowledge that all of us has experienced some type of trauma, right? And it may be high on the scale, it may be medium, it may be low. The very first thing that I would say that would be beneficial, right, is to acknowledge that there is trauma there. Acknowledge that something has happened, right? And that I have to recognize that this was not necessarily something that I should have gone through or I should have experienced, right? Because there's a lot of times that we try to um, trick ourselves or convince ourselves that, hey, this just happened. I'm going to just push through it. It's okay. I'm going to move the. No, acknowledge it, right? It wasn't the space. It wasn't supposed to happen. It did happen. Acknowledge it. Give yourself that place of acknowledgement that trauma happened. Number two, which is probably one of the harder things to do. Number two is talk to someone. Talk to someone. That is a hard place to be. And I want to say that because it's a lot of times that you're like, I want to talk about this trauma, but I just don't. Right. And then you hold it in, or you like you said, right? You just want that person, that loving arms, right? You want that someone just to hear you. And it's not necessarily that they have to have feedback back, but to hear you, right? But I understand that sometimes family, sometimes friend don't know how to respond to that trauma, right? And if that's the case, right, that second level breaks into two, right? Professional conversation, and it's not a taboo. I always have to say that therapy is not a taboo. Successful people go to therapy. Unsuccessful people go to therapy. People who are diagnosed go to therapy. People who are not diagnosed go to therapy. Therapy is a professional person that can give you feedback about what's going on with you, that can give you a different insight on what you're experiencing. That's all it is. It's someone that has a professional view that can give you insight to what you're experiencing, help you grow out of that. Three, right? The last part I would say is application. No matter what you've heard, no matter what you have put out there, you have to now do something, right? You have to do something. And I'm not saying that you're going to forget the trauma. I'm not going to say it's going to fall off like a heavy weight. It may. There are people that that happens for, but you have to do something. You have to now learn, how do I start to live but recognize that I've experienced trauma, because those traumas really shape how we interact with other people. And if I'm not taking the initiative to do something because of that trauma, right? Other people could trigger that trauma and not know it, right? There are certain things, a little bit more self-disclosure. So maybe I can give an example of how people can understand. For me, trauma was um I experienced early on a divorce with my parents, right? I used to always wait for my dad to come pick me up, and he would either be extremely late or not show up, right? So then I found myself early in my professional career, right, getting triggered or getting really frustrated when people would show up late to meetings, or like if I was going to be late, like there's traffic or something else, I would like, oh my gosh. And I had to really start to take that step back and self reflect and say, what is it about me that is making me really feel this way about people being late? And I had to do a lot of self work, a lot of, and also therapy myself too. And recognize that I was attributing, all those feelings I had back then about my dad being late, right? And not want to be there, to my work life, to my interactions with my friends, right? They could be 5 minutes late. I'm looking at them like, why are you late? Why weren't you here? We said this time, right? And it's like you're not even considering what they may have had gone through to get ready to come. But again, I'm sharing that example for you to see how it could start to shape, inform how you interact with others. So you have to do something. You have to start to apply yourself. And even sometimes put that disclaimer out there like, hey, listen, I'm still working on myself here. It's a little trigger for me if people show up late to stuff or this, that, or other. Don't take offense to it. I'm working through that. Right. So I would say those three kind of very broad steps. There's a lot within those steps, but those three steps can really kind of help with someone that is going through that.
How do you think Well, you just shared the last three were being late and the divorce of your parents. How do you think that has impacted your life as an adult?
As an adult, right? So, and this, I think this comes to the application part, right? It's one of those things where I found myself then saying, I don't want to experience that for myself, right? Or I don't want those that are in my family circle or what I'm developing or creating to turn out like that, right? So then you see this extra hard drive to say, you know what, if I'm going to be in this relationship with someone, right, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it goes right. Right. So you find that at the forefront of your conscious, but understanding that, right, I have to also have the reality of, right, in the space of that you can't force things to be a certain way. So it's a constant learning, right? It's a constant thing, but also it's one of those things where there's an appreciation. It's an appreciation when you do see relationships and marriages flourish, right? Because you see the work, you know the work that had to be put in. So there's a two side to it, right? I'm working really hard to do my best and not experience those things that cause trauma, but at the same time, appreciate the beauty of those that are making it work and that do have those things in place.
Do you see some of your childhood experiences, whether good, bad, or in between, showing up as triggers in the relationships that you talked about, whether they're personal or romantic?
I would say not as much now, and I think that's because I'm older. Of course, as a younger adult, very much so, right? It was one of those things where I would say that all of those experiences of different friendships, relationships, going off to college very early and stuff like that, formed a very rigid form of view of life that things are very black and white versus gray and grace, right? It was more of like, so if this person doesn't show up to this basketball game that we have scheduled today, they're not my friend. They can't be my friend, you know what I'm saying? So it became very black and white early on in life, and I had to really learned quickly as I got older to say, whoa, everything is not black and white because there's a lot of gray in this world, right? And that's where you find the beauty of those good experiences, where it's like putting yourself, the old saying, right? Put yourself in someone else's shoes, but truly doing that, not superficially, like, but truly saying, if I really showed up late to somewhere, it's not because I was purposely trying to do that. I really might have had some things going on. I got a flat tire. I don't want to have to make it sound like an excuse to somebody that had a flat tire, but I did, or whatever it may be. So I would say that there are times earlier in life where I saw those traumas or those experiences really start to affect certain relationships and things. But as I've gotten older, right, and understanding grace and understanding the experiences of life, as life has taught, it's one of those things where you could look back and say, yeah, you were doing a lot, Devin. Like you were being a little too hard. Like you had to come off of that.
I used to be a part of that club where there's only two ways to arrive: early and on time. Anything
Yes.
else is not acceptable, right?
Right.
I'm that person, and I said 9 p.m. It's 9:01. I'm gone. My car's already warmed up. Like, let's get out of here. Let's go home, right? But it's interesting, and the reason why I ask is because I'm a product of divorced parents,
Mhm.
and I'm a product of conditional love, right? So that's why I had to do really well in school. That's how I get the gold medals to be shown love and validation and attention. So as I grew in my 20s, which I call the decade of hell, what did I do as an adult? I went out there and I performed because that's all I knew. So my trauma was showing up in those ways. And when I didn't get the attention and validation from my partner, that's where I felt really bad. I was like, oh my God, you don't love me because I did this
Mhm.
for you. Oh
Mhm.
my God, I was on time, but you weren't. I had to learn as I got older that I'm projecting onto other people because sometimes we think our experience is the experience of the world. I'm like, there's 8 billion people on this planet, baby. There's no way they had, because I wouldn't wish my childhood on anyone else, right? Not even my
Mhm.
enemy. And there's, Devin, let me tell you, there's a lot of people I don't like, okay? So
Okay, okay.
wouldn't even wish this on them. But For those who are struggling with that, who look around and they say, okay, Devin, Terrain, you guys look like someone that treated me poorly in my relationship. So now there's always these reminders when they go out in the world of their trauma. How do we speak to them to understand that even though there may be people that will remind you of a trauma, it doesn't mean that they're going to re traumatize you?
Okay. So, and that's where the the fairness, right, of growth has to take root. And what I mean by the fairness of growth has to take root, there's a lot of times where we experience something, and because we experience something, everything that's related to that is bad, right? So I'm going to share an inside experience and joke, and I apologize if anybody likes Dairy Queen, but it's part of this, right? So there was one night that I was younger. I was maybe in early 20s. I went and got Dairy Queen, and this story definitely has a lot of relative to your question. So I went and got Dairy Queen, and I'll tell you what I ordered. I ordered some country fried chicken strips, right? So they're like country fried chicken strips. Like I used to love that from Dairy Queen. So I got them. I ate them, right? And right, listen to me when I tell you that that night, right? I had the worst stomach pain in life. Like I'm on the restroom floor crying out for help that I'm hurting so bad, right? Like, and after that moment, right? I was like, Dairy Queen is the devil. Like it's the worst, right? No matter what Dairy Queen shows up, right? I could be in a whole nother state. I'm like, no, no way. I'm not dealing with Dairy Queen. Nah, no, thank you. No, thank you, right? And like it's not even the same Dairy Queen that I experienced before, right? But every single Dairy Queen that I see, right, it's like, no. Part of that, right? That's my experience. I'm going to share an experience that I'm pretty sure some of your listeners have done before, right? They'll say, "Hey, what's your sign?" They say, "Oh, my sign is this." Oh no, I don't deal with any Geminis. I don't do any cancers. Like immediately, right? And what's happening is, as you mentioned earlier, right? You're projecting what you have experienced before, and you're making it everybody, right? I would tell anyone, right? I'm not telling you to approach everybody with a blank slate. Let me say that, put that disclaimer, because if you approach everybody with a blank slate and they do have some of the red flags that what you experienced before, you're going to go through the same cycle, right? So not telling you to forget, right? What I'm telling you is that you allow people the space, right? Allow people the space to show up. Now, if they show up and you're starting to see things that triggered you before, that you experienced before, especially when we're talking about like relationships, right? Romantic relationships are very, very, very intimate, close friends, right? Those type of things. When you see those red flags, yes, you do need to be aware of that because you don't want to experience the same thing over. But here's the most important part of all of that. You have to open your mouth. You have to say to this other person, "Hey, listen, I don't know if this is something that you're used to doing, but previously I've experienced this. And in experienced this, it made me feel like this, or I went through this because of this. I want to let you know about that. And I would hope that you can respect, right? That we try not to be in that arena because that's a trigger for me, right? In doing that, right? You now bring to the light to someone else where they may have been unconscious of. Now, this is where you can make the decision, right? If they continue to do that afterwards, that's where you could say, "Oh, I'm experiencing something similar to the last time." And you can make the decision if you want to exist in that or if you want to go ahead and step away from that. But it's very important that you open your mouth and have that conversation.
We have to let the people earn their expectations and reputations from us.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I 100% agree. Instead of saying that, well, I used to date this girl that had blonde hair, so you know what? Every blonde is the devil, right? Every brunette is the devil. Every girl that's 5'2", every girl that's 140, every girl that's double D cup. I don't know. We're just making it up as we
Yeah.
go along, right? Because
Mhm.
we want to. It's a self fulfilling prophecy, right? I'm single because everyone out there is bad. Everyone out there can hurt me. Sure, of course they can. Just like how you can invest in a stock market and lose your money. You can go work at a job and they can actually close it down and get replaced by AI, for example. Just like how you can wake up one day, go to your car, and just get hit by a bus. I just watched Final Destination and I was like, oh my God, some of these deaths are crazy in
Yeah.
this new one,
Mhm.
right? So there's a number of ways that bad things can happen to you. But if you go out there looking for the bad, how can you ever find the good? To your point, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Exactly. Yes. Agree.
You mentioned talking about it. Why do you think people struggle with communication?
So communication puts that person in a very vulnerable space because a lot of times, and unfortunately, it's kind of like what society teaches. A lot of times, people are so worried about their image and what others think about them that they're very hesitant to talk about the things that could potentially really disrupt their whole relationship with that person. I'm going to use a very small example from all the population of the world, right? If we talk about guys in general, and they say like, look, me and you are friends, right? And let's say that um, you've done some things over the times. Let's just say that you borrow my car, right? And when you bring it back, you don't bring it back with the same gas, right? But you don't know that I'm low on money, right? And it's really hard for me to make that gas that was already in there work. And now I have to spend other money that I didn't have before. You don't know that, right? You're just like, hey, I'm just going to run through the store real quick, man. I'm like, yeah. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm hoping you put the gas back in, right? And if I don't talk about this with you, right? But remember, it's going to make me vulnerable, right? It's going to show that maybe my finances aren't in a place where I would like them to be. So now it's going to make me vulnerable, right? It's going to open up something that's already a cut for me, right? For me to say, "Hey, Drain, listen, I really would appreciate if you could put the gas back in because I'm struggling financially." Right? And you may say to me, man, no problem at all. You might even fill it up, right? But it's one of those things where if that conversation can't be had without the worry or concern of embarrassment or how will you look at me, right? After that, then that's why a lot of people hesitate to have those conversations. Now, I use the kind of fun example, but that can get very serious, right? It could be something that is extremely, personal, right? I would say probably one of the ones that I hear the most that people hold on to and not talk about is if they were raped earlier on or molested and they're in a relationship. And I'm sorry, I know that's a touchy subject. It's a real one. And it's one of those ones that people will get into relationships and their partner may do some things that may make them feel really uncomfortable because it's something that they experienced during that trauma and time, right? And they may not want to share that. They may not know how to share that. They may not know what to talk about it because they may say, this person might leave me if they find out that I've been raped before or, that I've been molested. So I'm just going to hold on to that. And I'll just endure the little things that they may do that may trigger me because of what I experienced. So there's so many different ways, but again, it goes back to the image of somebody worried about how they may be perceived with that conversation. So I think that might be one of the biggest things, not the only thing, but one of the biggest things.
I went on a couple of dates with a girl that was sexually assaulted. She was sexually assaulted. I forget the city, but she went on a car ride with I guess someone she was dating at the time, or they went on a couple of dates, and she says that things kind of went in a way. It started out, but she said no, and then it just went where it went, unfortunately. I didn't know this prior to me dating her. So to your point, it's an act of vulnerability, right? Because there's some people who's gonna run, some people's gonna be understanding, and some people's be just in between. And when she brought it up, unfortunately, for my perspective, she brought it in a moment that her and I were being intimate or was leading up to that point, right?
Mhm,
I understood. So I said, okay, we don't have to necessarily go any further than what we've done now. She started to cry. In my mind, I'm thinking, is she crying because she's feeling rejected? Is she crying because she's open up, or she's just crying for something else? So I started to ask, but to be completely honest, you're asking someone to be vulnerable that you haven't known long enough. Like we know each other, but not a. I'm This is
Mhm.
me just remembering
Yeah,
how
yeah.
I felt, right? So
Mhm.
I'm asking someone to open up where I feel that we didn't reach that point yet, for us to open up about our traumas. So she's reliving it all over. And then
Mhm.
after, when her and I were discussing it and she was able to calm herself and we talked about it, one thing she shared was that thank you for not running away
Mhm.
from that conversation, right? Because we still hung out and whatever the
Mhm.
case is. What was surprising to me, Devin, was she said that if it was the reverse, she would have left.
Mm.
And I was
Mm.
like, wow, you're
Mhm.
able, you're grateful that someone was side by side
Mhm.
with you when you were vulnerable. But if it was reverse, you're saying that you wouldn't give that same grace. And I found that interesting because I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about, because sometimes what we would do or not do for the people we may want done for or not for us. So in the case of that example, I'm appreciative that you were there during my vulnerable moment and you're understanding. But then some people who may want that type of grace know deep down that they're not able to offer it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. And you mentioned vulnerability now, and she shared that she felt a little bit of shame and guilt because she had to relive it and explain it. What role do you think shame and guilt plays in our trauma? Either sharing it in a sense of being vulnerable or just trauma in general.
I think that really depends on your culture, to start off, and I know that's a very broad answer, but to dive into that answer, you know, some cultures in how they perceive certain things that are intimate or private being shared, right, can become something that is shameful, right? Or can make you feel guilty. And we know each culture kind of have this different light of things that you can talk about and things you can't talk about, right? But even if we're talking about the things you can talk about and can't talk about, I really believe that it's just one of those things where that guilt comes from how you perceive what others may think, right? Because think about it, right? There's people who may say, I don't feel guilty about that at all, right? There's people who will steal or do things and they be like, yeah, I stole before. Yeah, it's no problem at all, And then you got other people that's like, you know, they will crumble and feel guilty about the smallest of infractions, right? And they'll feel those ways. But I think again, it's how they perceive others viewing them and how much they care about that, right? Because even in the example that you gave, right, the guilt that she felt, right, and this is my assumption, would be that because she can't offer the same that was given to her, she feels almost guilty that she got that, right? That you were there and showed up for her, even though in her mind she like, yeah, I wouldn't show up you in that moment, right? So it's kind of like that double-edged sword of that experience, but also how do people truly feel about others and their views on them? And I'm sure there's other things we can add to that. In this moment, I'm thinking I'm leaning a little bit more towards that one as an example.
And I wonder how many people didn't show up for her and she just expected people not show up, right? And this goes for like men and women. How many times have we asked for assistance and we're disappointed,
Mhm, mhm,
right? Like our first caretakers for most of us are our mother or our father. If our mother or father are not protective of us or give us a protection that we needed, right? Because sometimes we may think, well, I gave you a roof over your head and your food in your belly. Okay, that's fine. Maybe that's not my love language,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Maybe the parent who's working the 12, 14 hours for the roof over the head and the food in the belly, maybe that child wanted quality time. Mom, I miss you. Dad, you're never home. I miss you. Right? So I think sometimes it's tough because the default is always to love someone the way that we would want to be loved.
Mhm,
And it takes courage to love them in the way that they want to be loved, but it goes back to your communication point. And I honestly believe that shame and guilt does, to your point again, play a role in that because some people can look at it and be like, well, I don't feel shame in anything that I do.
mhm,
You're late and I beat you up. It's your fault.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, you
mhm,
didn't fill up the gas a tank. Okay, I'm going to borrow your car and crash it. I don't
mhm,
feel guilty because like there's some people out there that would take it to the extreme. How can then we maybe soothe ourselves so we don't have situations where we're compromising our morality or even compromising, to your point, our cultural beliefs?
mhm. And so this is where we have to be careful though. Can we soothe ourselves? Yes, but we have to be very careful and bring balance to that. And I think a lot of times what that looks like is standards and boundaries, right? Those two together, right? Standards and boundaries. And we have to understand that standards, right, are our expectations of what we would like, right? So that's standards, the expectations of what we would like, right? So if I would like my wings cooked crispy, right? If they come back and they're not crispy, they didn't meet my standard, right? It's okay for me to request crispy wings or just not eat them, right? If I'm going to stick to my standard, right? So when we talk about that, we have to have a standard in life of what we expect, how we expect to be treated, right? How we expect to interact with others. Those are standards. And we have to be firm on our standards, not rigid, firm, right? Because there are some times where there's something that may not completely fit the standard, right? But it fits your life. Now, the other side of that is boundaries. Think about boundaries as fence lines to protect your kingdom, right? Think about it like that. Boundaries are fence lines to protect your kingdom. It's not made to box you in. If your boundaries are boxing you in from social life, from interacting with others, sorry, you don't have boundaries. You have barricades. We don't want barricades. Barricades block both sides. You're stuck in and they stuck out, right? Boundaries. Boundaries should be clear fences, right? You know they there. The other person know they there by your communication. That's important, y'all. Invisible fences, but you're communicating to them that invisible fences are there. Because if you don't communicate to them that invisible fences are there, they're going to run into that fence and they're going to trip themselves up. And then you're going to be frustrated because they're tripped up about it. So boundaries are set as a way, right, of giving appropriate space between others and your kingdom, right? Your thoughts, your feelings, all of that. So it's very important that when you're talking about boundaries, right? A boundary, I'll give you an example of a boundary, right? A boundary could be, hey, after 9 o'clock, please don't call me. I'm starting to go through my night routine. I'm starting to get ready for sleep. And I just appreciate if all of our talking, texting, or whatever else happens before 9, right? That's a boundary, right? It's not a standard, it's a boundary, right? So those two together, right? I think that that's how you start to really develop a way of soothing what is your peace.
Why do you think in general people struggle with maintaining boundaries?
Because we really would like people to come into our kingdom. We really would like people to come into our space. I think that goes to, and I said that in a joking way, but I actually really mean it, right? I think that it's a lot of times because, for example, right, we may and remember it's a two-sided thing, right? So we might allow people to break standards or we might let them get through boundaries because we feel like we really like them and we really want them to be close to us, right? So we'll overlook that you may not meet the bare minimal standards, right? We'll overlook that you not the crispy wings. There's a couple of little pieces on here that's crispy, so I'm gonna take it, right? But the boundary part of it, right? You tell them, you communicate to them about the boundaries, but they don't respect them, right? But you really like them, right? Remember, you really like them, and for whatever reason, right? You might really like that person, and there's multiple reasons why, right? Some people really like somebody because they're beautiful, right? They're like just so beautiful to me, right? So I'm gonna remove some of these boundaries and let you get closer in, even though you're breaking these boundaries and standards, but you're beautiful. So yeah, I want you close. Or maybe they're really smart, right? And you love the intellectual conversations, but they break boundaries all day long, right? They're texting you after 9, and they're calling you after 9 and say, "Hey, listen, I read this really good book and I want you to read it too." And it's 10:15, right? And it's like all these different things, right? But I think it's really we allow people to break boundaries, or we don't keep those boundaries because we really desire that person to be a part of our life. And sometimes that could be to our detriment.
How do you think then the fear of loneliness or loneliness itself impacts us maintaining boundaries?
I think that runs hand in hand with what I was just talking about, as sense of we want that person there. And even sometimes we will accept someone who don't meet the standards, break boundaries, but they're there, right? They're giving you the time. They're showing up, right? And it's like some people feel like I might not be able to get this, right? For whatever reason they may feel, right? Maybe they feel like they don't bring enough to the table. Maybe they feel like they're ugly, right? Whatever may be their thing that they're self-conscious about, right? That they say, I'm gonna accept this because this is in front of me. So forget the boundaries, forget the standards. I'm just gonna accept this because this person is the person that's showing up. And I think that sometimes people will accept that because it's there versus the fear of not being able to have somebody else to show up.
Not having someone to show up then sometimes can lead us to what we're talking about, the fear of loneliness. Someone that we know is toxic, chaotic, and destructive, we continue to welcome back in our lives.
Mhm.
You step over my boundary, because they're encroaching, right? It's like that person that takes 1 inch every day, and before you know it, they're having breakfast with you at the table. Like, oh my God, how'd you get in my house?
Yes.
You're here with me, right?
Uh-huh.
Right? Do you then think that maybe some people will think that they're good enough for the chaos, but they're not good enough for the people who've done the work and who are living healthy lives?
Oh, this is a great question. I love this question. I think that sometimes what happens is that could be true, what you're saying. And I think also what could be true is they become so used to the chaos, right? That they have attributed chaos to be the norm. And they don't even know that there's something better over here because they've gotten so used to the chaos, right? It's almost like if you have a car that doesn't have AC, right? The first time you got in it, you hated it. You're just like, I hate this car. I'm hot. I'm sweating all the time. I got to drive with the windows down, all this, right? But after some time, right, it's like you don't even really necessarily recognize it here and there, but you've adjusted to it. And you're like, yeah, it is just a car, right? Like I'm good with it. And other people like, you do know you could get a car with AC, or you can get AC put in your car. Like, things can change and be better for you. But it's just one of those things where certain people may become so used to it that that's just life for them. And they don't even care, not I don't wanna say care, they don't even wanna take the chance of trying something else, right? Because I got this is working for me, and I'm making air quotes, y'all, if y'all can see me. This is working for me, so ultimately, I'm just gonna stick with the car with no AC, right? Where all your friends have cars with AC, they're trying to tell you, "We can help you get a car with AC. You can go here, or we can take you here, or, we can do these things. Just let go of that car." And it's like, yeah, but the car is getting me to work. It's getting me to where I need to be, and, I can deal with not having AC. And that's really sometimes what happens. People just become used to that and believe that's life.
Our hell is their ground level.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I hear you. I hear you. Okay, that would make sense because we're looking at it like this is just madness right here. They're like, nope, I'm used to this.
Mhm.
That's tough because then you would have some people like yourself, maybe like me, like so many others. We've done the work, we've had the trauma, we're working through it. We meet someone like that, and then we're like, oh, I can fix that person because I was able to fix me, right? And then we get with them and we're like, Devin, I can't fix this person. Help me, right? When it comes from like a relationship standpoint, how many times do you see, or maybe just in general, that someone who's done the work, they get into a relationship with someone that is coming along and they think they can save them, resulting in they want the healing journey better than their current person that they're dating.
Mhm. I'm gonna use the example. I like using examples because sometimes it helps people connect with the view. Let's think about this like the gym, right? Let's say that you went to the gym and almost everybody knows, right? It's hard, right? Like you get in there and you like there's days where you like, man, I don't know why I'm here. I don't want to be here. I'd rather just be sitting on the couch and watching TV and just be under a blanket or whatever else. But once you get to a place where you went to the gym enough and you start to see the results, you like, okay, it's bad, but it's not that bad because the results of it and what it's given me is really good. So then you exist in that world and then it becomes second nature eventually. It takes some time, but eventually, right? I'm using that as an example because then what happens is this is how you get those people that be in the gym and say, hey, you should come to my gym. And the first time that person comes to the gym, they're like, "You're crazy. You're doing all of this? What?" And that person's out of breath, they're wheezing and everything else, and they leave, and you're expecting them to come to the gym the next day, and they're not there. And you say, "You know what? Maybe next week they'll come back." And they're not there. And then eventually you say, "Why? Hey, why you stop coming to the gym?" They say, "That's too much. I can't do that." Right? Now think about that, right? We've done a lot of work to make it through trauma, to make it through different experiences we've had in life to be where we are now, right? To be existing in, I would say, is a fairly good state, right? So now you have somebody else and you're trying to share with them, hey, all you got to do is start eating right, lift a little bit of these weights, every once in a while, do some running, right? And it's going to be great. It's going to be great. And because that work requires so much to change, right? Because it's a mindset and it's the application. It requires so much to change. If they're not in that space to want to do it for themselves, you will never be able to help them. You will never be able to fix them. And it's nothing against you. It's not that the stuff that you've done isn't good. It's not that the stuff that you've done or can or sharing with them can't help them. It's really truly do they want it or not? And that's even with some of the clients that I see coming to try to be sober, right? There's ones that really want it and they put the work in and you see it, right? And then you have other ones that are there because somebody said you got to be here and you see the difference. It's a big difference. So when you're talking about being in a relationship or friendship or anything like that, right? And you see this person experiencing some of the things you've experienced, or you can recognize that they're going through a certain tough time in life, and you like, this really can help them. And you're excited because you know this really can help them, right? I will tell you, I will caution you, please don't invest too much of your heart into that because what's going to happen is you'll find yourself becoming bitter or frustrated with that person. But remember, you brought it to them. Allow them that space, like we talked about earlier, right? To want to be a part of that oasis, that change. And if that's what they want to do, then flood it on them, let them have it, right?
I shared with someone the other day that sometimes you have to love yourself so much that you have to come out of those types of relationships. And this was someone who was in a relationship with someone that he found out that she had an addiction.
Mhm.
She hid it, she lied about it, but before he found out, she was very abusive to him, verbally and emotionally. And he decided that he couldn't do it anymore. And he felt a sense of shame because he was thinking, it's tough to walk away from something you're invested in. I think they're together like 3 or 4 years. And I shared with him, that's probably one of the most courageous things you can ever do is to walk away for your own peace, your own happiness, your own mental health. You can only fix you. You can support people, and we all need support. But to your point, if the person doesn't want it, they will bring you down a lot of times. And I've seen couples where there's one person struggling with that, and the person will bring both people down and they lose their jobs, they lose their homes, children get taken away if they're involved because now both parents aren't capable or even available to take care of
Mm.
the family in that regard. When it comes to substance abuse or substance use, what are some of the ways that you see it impacts a couple and or family that you would like to share today?
Sure. So it affects the whole. It affects the whole. Of course, it's affecting the person, but it affects those that, whether their partner, wife, husband, kids, outside family, friends. It affects everything. And it affects everything because it's a difference between them trying to hide it and them showing it, or it's coming up to the surface, as you even mentioned, right? But even in hiding it, right? It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that guilt, that shame, all these different things that are being taken away from the family, hidden, right? That is tearing them up too. And those things are where the family is affected in that way because they're seeing the person that they love act different, move different, physically look different, right? All these things are going on with them and they're confused and not knowing why. And that person's partner is even looking at them and saying, this is not the same person that was I invested with. I showed up to love and stuff like that. So then when it does cross over to the knowledge of the rest of the family, right? I'm gonna start with the kids. If there's kids involved, there's so many different emotions that open from that. And that's dangerous. And it's dangerous because now you have kids that fall into so many different categories of this. You have kids that now maybe become curious of what is this that my mom or my dad is using, and they become curious, right? I've given the example before that kids will watch you take vitamins. And if you don't explain to them that those are vitamins to help them, right? They may think you're taking drugs and they start to now look at you in a different light and it affects them. And I just put that out there just for consciousness of us all. But when a kid knows consciously that you're taking drugs, right? A kid is programmed early on from the school system, from the parents, from other people. Don't take drugs. Drugs are not good, right? But then they're seeing that parent take them, right? And it just really disrupts their life. It becomes traumatic. It really becomes traumatic. Now, going to the other partner in the situation, right? How that partner responds affects the kids. How that partner responds affects the person that's using. How that partner responds also influences that family structure. So it's one of those things, and I'm keeping it very, very high level because it dives into so much. It's so many different tentacles that stretches into. If you can think it, it can happen within that. So it's one of those things that ultimately the bottom line of the effect is it disrupts the natural flow of that family. And it either can disrupt it to where it falls off the rails, or it disrupts it to where the partner and the rest of the family have to lift a heavier weight to make sure that that love helps that person push through. And again, like we mentioned, that love and heavy weight that they have to push and pick up to help has to also be paired with that person wanting to do it. And that's the hard part because a lot of times the other person does not want to do it.
We talked about guilt and shame from the person who's going through a traumatic experience from that perspective. And what we're talking about now when it comes to substance use, how does guilt and shame impact the person who's being affected when their partner is causing the trauma? In this case, substance use.
Mhm. So let's think about it for a moment. Let's like take a step back and think about an example, right? Let's say that you have a partner, and normally this partner is with you everywhere, right? And y'all hang out, y'all have pictures together on social media, all these different things, right? And you go to an event or you go somewhere and you're there alone, right? And they ask you, "Hey, where's your partner?" Right? And it's like you knowingly that your partner is going through this, right? in that moment, I promise you, you're gonna feel the prick. You're gonna feel that shame. You're gonna feel that resentment. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on in that person's mind because they don't want to have to lie, right? So now they're having to protect the image of their family, right? And I'm pretty sure that over time becomes wearing, right? That every time you show up to a family event, every time you go here, right? Oh, where's your partner? You know, it's like, yeah, they're home. You know, it's like, well, why they didn't come? You know, it's like, and it's all these things, right? Because again, depending on your transparency, right? You may say, well, a partner's going through something, right? And just we're trying to make it through. And then it might be one of those things where it's like, okay, well, we'll pray for you, or let us know how we can help, right? And all those little things affect. They're like bricks, tiny bricks that go on the shoulders of that person that's experiencing that, right? So even though they're not experiencing the actual use, right, they're getting all of that as well as seeing their partner deteriorate and become a person that's not the person that they initially fell in love with. So that person feels just as much pressure as the person that's actually going through it, if not more.
It's like secondhand smoke. You're not doing the act, but you're still being impacted in some cases, maybe even worse than the person who's
Worse.
doing it.
Yes, very much so. That's a great example. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. In this example with the guy, he actually did charity work with some women who were abused and near poverty. So
Mhm.
not only to your point was it affecting their social standing, he now his work because you have a charity yourself. If you have a charity working with people who you're trying to help out and in your own household,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? You're going through that. Something has to give, right? And I share with people, I make sometimes you'll see people who are struggling with that, they will do some very selfish things.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's because of what they're going through. Sometimes it's because that's actually who they are because they want to continue to do it. And it is a struggle. And you can speak on this. It's a struggle that it's hard to watch. Not only the person who's going through it, but I would say for me, because I haven't done any drugs in my life, it's hard for to see that person go through because that person doesn't even have a choice.
Mhm. Mhm. Think about how you had mentioned whenever you went to the school, right? And you had to put on a coach hat. And when you put on the coach hat, that's when you were able to see, I can see that what they're going through or what they're doing like that. The moment that you start to see what they were going through and what they were experiencing, those who have that heart, it automatically is almost like this kind of cringe at your heart, like, oh, this person is going through this, and I don't want them to have to go through this, right? That's a normal reaction for most people that are in this type of field of providing some type of charity, support, service. You know, that first thing that you feel is that prick, that squeeze to your heart, and you're like, because I don't want this person to have to go through this. And then as you start to hear their stories and the things that they've experienced, it's just like you mentioned, right? It's something that starts to generate in you that's like, I gotta do something. I gotta do something.
Absolutely agree. You want to save everyone until you realize that a lot of people don't even want to be saved.
Mhm. And that's just as heartbreaking as helping those ones that are going through it. That you see there's some that are basically telling you, no, no, thank you. I'm gonna continue in this. Taking those chances of overdosing, taking those chances of losing everything that they already have, including family, children, their job, whatever it may be. It's a lot that they may be willing to sacrifice, and sometimes they have to sacrifice those things and hit rock bottom to even start to look up.
Absolutely. When it comes to that type of experience, for someone to have to hit rock bottom, what impact do you think friends who maybe are encouraging the behavior play on them hitting rock bottom?
The ones that normally encourage that behavior, once that person hits rock bottom, normally those people disappear. Normally those people disappear. That's the normal response of it. So whatever they may be in, let's say there is a person that drinks, right? They're alcoholic, right? And their buddies are bringing that person to drink every night. Like, hey, come on. And even if they're not drinking, they're just watching that person drink, right? Just go ahead, go ahead, go ahead, right? Because again, this person may be drinking because he or she feel like they're socializing, right? They feel like these people care about them. But then whenever you start to recognize that you're not able to function at work, right? Or you can't drive to work because you have so many DUIs, they've taken your license, right? You call those friends and say, "Hey, can you help me get to work?" Right? And they say, "Why you can't get there?" Right? Well, I got all those DUIs because I'm always out with y'all drinking, and oh, it sounds like that's your problem. That's normally what happens to those people who are influencers to the negative behaviors that come along with substance use. So normally they disappear when you need them. So when you hit that rock bottom, normally they're not there to hold a hand out to pick you up.
They care as long as they are able to have fun. Once they're not able to have fun anymore, okay, bye.
Yeah, their fun is at your expense.
Let me ask you, Devin, one final question before I let you go today. I want to give you three wishes for this question.
Okay.
What are three things you wish people knew in regards to how trauma controls us and why?
Hmm. Great question. Three wishes of knowledge, right? Knowledge. Okay. Number one, that untreated or how can I word this? Untreated or untapped, like not giving attention to the trauma that you have will affect you for the next 25 to 30 years minimum. That's what I would say. The first thing, if you don't treat the trauma that you've experienced or dealt with, go ahead and say that that's going to be a bag that you're going to pack with you for the next 20 to 35 years minimum, no matter what your age is. Let me say that too. No matter if you're 10, no matter if you're 30, no matter if you're 50, right? That trauma, if you don't deal with it, go ahead and pack the bag for it to be with you for the next 20 to 30 years minimum. That's one thing. Number two, I would say that, and this is not to demeanor it, everyone has experienced trauma. You're not alone. You're not alone in that you've experienced trauma. The trauma you have experienced, someone has experienced it also. Maybe not exactly the same way, but they've experienced it also. And with that being said, there are people who have overcome it. Find that. Find that. Just the same way social media could be used for bad, it could be used for good too. Just like that. The third thing I would say is that this, what we're doing now, is a secret sauce to helping people grow. Instead of always putting on music, instead of always, doing something that is crazy, put this on. Just like you're doing right now with this live stream, put these on, listen to these podcasts, listen to the radio stations like this that are talking about real things and real events because you'll be surprised what you can get from it. You'll be surprised how helpful it will be to you. So